By then, we could see temperatures in the southwest up to 26.
Hello, you're watching Breakfast with Sally Nugent and Charlie State.
Now, as schools across England begin to welcome pupils back to the classroom, many parents will be seeking reassurance that their child's education won't be disrupted after months of home learning and whole year groups being sent home.
We know that in Scotland, a recent record number of coronavirus cases is being linked to schools going back. Let's talk about this with England's Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson. Very good morning to you. Thank you for your time this morning. Is it your working assumption as Education Secretary that COVID rates will go up as schools reopen?
Well, first of all, I'm sure you'd want to join with us in terms of wishing all those children, not just those who are going to school for the first time, but all those ones who may be going to a new school and those moving up a year, the very best. There'll be a sense of sort of excitement, but also nervousness for so many pupils today. But we've been trying to strike that sensible balance, a balance towards recognising how important it is for children to be able to get an education, but while dealing with a pandemic. And, we've seen the lifting of all national restrictions so people can go about their business. And it's really important for us that children are having as normal a pre-pandemic education experience as possible. But we do recognise precautionary measures have to be taken. That's why we're doing the mass testing in all secondary schools as children return.
Is it your working assumption that COVID rates will go up as schools go back?
Well, as I say, we're striking that sensible balance. We're going to be in a position where we're going to be testing, delivering, over 9 million tests over the next sort of couple of weeks in terms of children. We expect those tests to identify more cases as a result of, within children as they're being tested, as they wouldn't have been tested during the summer holiday period. But we've already seen over the last week children returning, hundreds of thousands of children returning to school. This has been done safely, it's been done securely, and children have already been benefiting from a much more normal classroom experience. And we've been enjoying over the summer going back to the pub, going to music festivals, going to theatres again. It's right, there's where we have those same freedoms in our sort of social life. It's really important that children are able to have that same much more normal education experience that they would have been having pre the pandemic.
We've asked people this morning already about their experiences, and we've been contacted by someone who has a connection with a school in Barwell in Leicestershire. So here's an example. You were talking about how it's going to work in practice. The school went back on the 25th of August, so a little earlier than some in England. Yesterday, school had 12 COVID cases. 300 in the school, now reintroducing bubbles already. What does that tell you?
Well, firstly, what we sort of set this out, and we set this out before the sort of summer holidays, is actually the need for children to isolate, along with those adults who are double jabbed, will not be a requirement. We've lifted the requirement on schools to do the testing and tracing themselves. That will be done by Test and Trace organisation itself. If a child is contacted by Test and Trace because they've had contact, that doesn't mean to say that they will be missing school. It will just be giving advice to have a PCR test, but they're able to continue to be in that school environment. And what we're wanting to do is to have that normality as much as possible. But we do have a contingency plan of where they will have to be, working with local public health teams, where there are measures that have to be put in place. It's right that we have those precautionary measures there. But what is key is children are not going to be having to isolate away from school, and they're not going to be missing more time in the classroom, as sadly so many were in a position of having to miss time in the classroom in the last academic year.
Well, I mean, you can use a phrase for it like contingency plans, but the reality is it's disruption, isn't it? I mean, the example I gave you a moment ago, already that is disruption, and it is precisely the thing that parents and students themselves are fearful of. They've had so much of it. And what people are worried about is there's a real risk because of the relaxation of all the restrictions around social distancing and other things, that this could be the perfect storm. I'll give you another example. A teacher got in touch with us this morning saying, very practical, and this is what it boils down to. I have no windows and no ventilation in my classroom. What is the government doing to ensure all schools are compliant? So here's the room. There is a certain number of pupils coming in. There are no windows and there's no ventilation. What then?
So what we've done all the way through this pandemic is look at how we can support schools best to be able to reopen. Of course, there's a massive difference, as you're well aware of, between schools returning in September of this year compared to schools returning either in March earlier on this year or in September last year, is where the whole adult population has been offered not just one vaccine, but 2 vaccines. So those who are working in schools have had the opportunity to be double vaccinated. And that's the biggest difference. That is why we're able to take these steps in order to be able to open up schools, lift restrictions, both.
Okay, I'm just going to bring you back to the question. If I may, I'm just going to, for the first time, I'm going to try and get you to concentrate just on the question, which is a room. I want you to talk about that room, that teacher. A room with no windows and no ventilation. The wider issues are one thing. I want you to talk about that room and what happens next.
Well, as you're well aware, we're doing a whole set of measures, and of course the vaccine programme is the key reason why we can return
okay, give me
to
3
normality.
in relation to that
now,
teacher who's worried about that classroom.
As you'll appreciate, we're always looking at how we can improve the sort of security and the sort of striking that sensible balance towards getting children back into school, but also continuing to deal with a whole sort of global pandemic.
Okay, so I'm really trying, Gavin Williamson, I'm really trying to make sure that we don't end up talking over each other. But I'm very keen that you address that issue. So I have a teacher with a classroom with no ventilation and no windows. So you say you're looking at the wider issues, and I'm trying to work out what happens in that circumstance. Are you, for example, as the Education Secretary, say, do you know what, for the time being, don't use that room, because you cannot make that room compliant with the principles you're talking about. So, for example, that room, don't use it. Is that what you would advise?
So that's not what I'm saying, and that's why we've got a programme of CO2 monitors, because even though that room may not have windows that can open, it doesn't mean to say that there's a problem in terms of ventilation in that room. That's why we've got a programme of CO2 monitors.
Have the schools got those monitors yet?
Sorry, I didn't hear you there.
Have the schools got those monitors today?
So they are being rolled out during this term. And of course, it's a whole sort of, we have to take that balanced approach. We're having to look at, what's the impact in terms of a vaccine programme suppressing, whether it's the Delta variant or earlier variants, is how we're reducing the link between COVID and hospitalisations. And it's the fact that we've had that rollout of that programme that means that we can take a different approach to schools. It means that we're able to lift restrictions. Children are able to benefit from a more normal school experience. But we continue to have those, those measures in place that we can introduce, and schools may have to introduce on the advice of public health teams if they're required across in areas of the country where there's higher rates, because we don't want to see a position where schools are having to close, and we'd rather be in a place where we put additional measures into those schools than seeing children being sent home from those schools.
Just on a technicality, Mr. Williamson, can I just ask you, the CO2 monitors, I mean, why haven't the schools got them? Now is when the schools are reopening. I don't understand. I literally don't understand. You knew when term started. Why haven't they got them?
So it's part of a programme that we just
recently
announced in terms of
why isn't it now?
And actually the programme of vaccination, the fact that the vaccination is actually suppressing the virus and having such a big from those
just
schools.
On a technicality, Mr. Williamson, can I just ask you, the CO2 monitors, I mean, why haven't the schools got them? Now is when the schools are reopening. I don't understand. I literally don't understand. You knew when term started. Why haven't they got them?
So it's part of a programme that we
But
just
you said that
recently
before.
announced in terms
Why
of
isn't
the
it
rollout.
now?
And actually, the programme of vaccination, the fact that the vaccination is actually suppressing the virus and having such a big impact, we're rolling out the CO2 monitors as an extra layer of support for schools. And it's just an extra thing that we're doing for schools to make sure things run as smoothly as possible.
The rollout of vaccinations for 12 to 15-year-olds, what's your personal opinion on that?
Well, personally, I think parents would, and speak as a parent myself, who took my daughter, who's a 16-year-old, for her first jab just for weekend. I think parents will find it deeply reassuring to have a choice of whether their children should have a vaccination or not. We obviously wait for the decision of JCVI. You can imagine that, probably a lot of us are very keen to hear that and very much hope that we're in a position of being able to roll out vaccinations for those who are under the age of 16.
Are you expecting that decision? You undoubtedly know more about this than we do. Are you expecting that decision of the vaccination of 12 to 15-year-olds imminently? Can you give us any idea of that?
I'd certainly be hoping that it is a decision that will be made very, very soon, yes.
I'm going to try and push you on that. That has been said for some time. Are we talking about this week or next week? Because given that schools are opening all over the UK, it becomes particularly current. So are we talking within days, within weeks? Give us a timeline if you can.
So I would love to be able to give you a timeline. JCVI is a completely independent committee. They are not there to be take the instructions from the government. Obviously, we listen to their advice and they'll reach a decision. I'm told and I understand very, very soon. We're obviously preparing and have been preparing for this. The NHS has a great deal of experience of rolling out vaccinations in the school age population, as they've been delivering the most amazing vaccine rollout right across, a whole adult population over the last few months. So we're ready to go, but we do wait for the JCVI opinion on this.
How quickly, assuming, and I appreciate the point you're making about waiting for the scientists' decision, how quickly would that rollout happen? I mean, I'm not, maybe you know the numbers, 12 to 15-year-olds, how many are there, and how quickly would they get their first vaccination? What's the programme?
Well, what we'll be doing is, as you're very aware, and of course so many teachers and parents and students are aware themselves, we're very experienced, the NHS is very experienced in terms of leading vaccination programmes in schools. We'll obviously be looking at doing that at pace if we get approval to do so. But we do have to wait for the JCVI announcement in order to be able to share details of what that would look like, depending on what JCVI look to do. But there's very well established programmes of vaccination. You see millions of children being vaccinated every single year within school settings and very established processes of consent. So this is understood by parents and schools themselves, but we really do have to wait for that JCVI announcement.
Gavin Williamson, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
There's been some sporting history this morning.
Across the country, everything from collecting your bins to delivering to supermarkets or to restaurants. Now, there's all sorts of reasons why. Brexit and the pandemic's meant a lot of drivers have gone home. There's also licensing and cost issues. A lot of drivers looking to do something else and of course, how do they make sure that that does not translate into higher costs for all of us? So I'll talk about that a little bit more this morning and get the views of some of the staff down here, find out how they are coping with the shortage and whether it will mean that your bins are collected a little less frequently. More from me later.
We'll see you then, Ben. Thanks very much indeed. You're watching.
They do, and also we also know that you can mix it with various fruit shoot drinks and get funny test results. That's great fun. That's science in action.
You look quite well yourself.
I've enjoyed
right.
2 weeks in the 2 weeks holidays in the Highlands of Scotland with my family.
Were you able to switch off?
Not really.
Okay. A bit, maybe.
A bit. I could do with a few more weeks in Scotland.
Always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Professor Callum Semple, thank you. It's great to get all of that info from you. Thank you.
You're watching BBC Breakfast, still to come this morning. Ben will be finding out why a shortage of drivers is now affecting your bin collection as well. Morning, Ben.
Yeah, morning to you. I get all the rubbish jobs, don't I? Good morning. We're in Stafford today, and we're talking about an industry that you may take for granted.
Some showers out towards the west, but by then we could see temperatures in the southwest up to 26.
Hello, you're watching Breakfast with Sally Nugent and Charlie State.
Vaccinations for those who are under the age of 16.
As the Taliban tighten their grip on a...
Good morning. The driver shortage continues, and this time it could be your bin service that's affected. So I'm in Stafford this morning looking at the impact on some of those services that we might take for granted.
Good morning. Another record-breaking night for Cristiano Ronaldo.
Hayley Mills was a Disney child star.
But by then we could see temperatures in the southwest up to 26.